All right, and we're live, guys. Thanks so much for joining us here on our live stream of the Pro Wrestling Rewind or the Wrestling Rewind here on nerdtoknowmedia and the True Penny channel, and of course Phoenix Femme if you're listening to this on Tuesday night. My name is Darrell Connor, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Mr. Dave Stevens. How are you, Dave?
Doing fantastic. Ready to head into the dark side of the world. What's up,
Yeah,
guys?
yeah. This topic we said we were going to touch on it. We did touch on it last week, but it's so vast and it's so deep and it's so good that we said right, we'll just give it its own episode as such. And yeah, like I watched this kind of with the two most harrowing episodes first, um, being the Chris Benoit ones, and then kind of worked back. So I feel like I got the worst out of the way first, and then was like, well, the rest of it's not so bad. I will have to say, WrestleLamia, is that's the chat channel. They
Yeah.
did a similar series, which I really liked, and so when it came to this, I was like, okay, they've kind of touched on this before, but the way Vice did it was just excellent. So, what did you think going into this? Did you have any preconceived notions, or were you not a blank slate?
I had heard about this for, since it started um last year back in April, and I did not watch it at the time because I wasn't sure if I wanted to get, I don't know, there's certain things in wrestling with certain topics that as a wrestling fan I have knowledge of, but I've avoided. I
Right.
didn't necessarily want to get into the gritty. I didn't know if I wanted to actually understand why these things were so important because we kind of put those rose-colored tinted glasses on. But I will say I started in order. I was lucky my cable provider had them all on demand, so
Right.
I was able to watch all 12 episodes for seasons. So I did start with the Match Made in Heaven episode, which is the Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth,
Mm.
and within 5 minutes of hearing it being narrated by Dutch Mantel, the fantastic interviewees, how well produced it was, I said, "Oh, okay, I'm in. I'm hooked." And if you haven't watched it, listen to us because we're not really going to spoil anything. We're talking history here,
Right.
but you guys have to check this out. And I'm not getting paid by Vice to say this. It is
you know,
phenomenally produced.
yeah. One thing I would have to say, like Vice's production of everything is great. Like one of my favorite documentaries ever is Cyber War, about, like the major hacks that happened and what's going on in that world. I love it. It's fantastic. They are like very biased with
Yes.
their left leaning stuff, and that's it is what it is. But kind of going in with it, you know that. But as far as like watching, like they did a good one. I think they did a Netflix one on the pandemic recently as well. That was pretty good. But any documentary I've seen, once you kind of are aware of the bias going in, you have a great time watching it. And just as I said, like WrestleLamia did a similar series to this, which was good. It's on YouTube. You can watch it for free, and I would urge everybody to do so. But just watching some of these, it was unreal. It was fantastic.
Well, I think, like you're saying, that I knew they would have a bias. So actually, I was kind of worried about what the bias would be against professional wrestling. Were they
Mm.
trying to turn people off from it? And that's not at all the impression that I got watching the show. If anything, I felt more intrigued to tune into Raw this week, even though, I mean, I'm, it would be awful, but they did such a good job of really taking you back in time
Yes.
to the feelings of that time period. It's like someone who studied history,
Mm.
as you did yourself. That's one of the most important aspects. Is you can't look at things with today's glasses
No.
and expect to understand the context of what occurred. And I
Context
think
is
Vice did a great job.
context is key. I think that's with everything, and that's one thing that I'm gonna do a lot of this comparison because it's fair. But WrestleMania, they didn't do that as such. They just kind of told you the facts and that was it. But these guys, I think it's just because they had the actual people there. Like when you're watching the stuff on the Von Erichs, they had the last surviving member of the Von Erichs. The
I mean,
Fabulous Millers.
Lacey wasn't on there. I was a little
Exactly. Yeah,
disappointed. There was no Lacey.
I was like, they didn't even mention her. It's like, okay. With the Montreal Screwjob, they had everyone involved with it. The Fabulous Moolah stuff, Brawl for All. Brawl for All was actually one of my favorite ones, to be fair. It was just
Heard
hilarious.
that one.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that one. But they really did kind of set up. What I was surprised by. Um, WWE had WWE footage, like a lot of
Yes,
WWE footage, and it wasn't. It was weird. It wasn't like the stuff that was on TV. So it must have been stuff that was shot on a B camera or else their own personal footage that they had. But I was still shocked that was allowed to even be shown.
that was one of the things I was most curious about going into it, and I think second season parts 1 and 2, the first 2 episodes are the Benoit, and they had the footage
Yes.
of Chavo on the night of the Benoit celebration, that 3-hour Raw. There's no way WWE would give them permission. So I don't know what
Legally,
exactly.
legally, I'm like, what? How did this happen? I think it's because it's public domain now because it was part
Is
of a
it?
crime. Well, it must be. I don't know. I'm not a legal expert here.
Yeah, neither of us are doctors, but we
No.
think the legality here.
Yeah, I look. If anyone knows, let us know. Are they in trouble here? I might reach out to Corey and ask him. But it's one of those things that really shocked me that from the get go we had footage, like
Yes.
actual real WWE footage, which is weird to see on a documentary where WWE aren't always been shown in the best light as such. But the first season I think was we'll kind of talk of the first season and then jump to the second season. The first season was very light in comparison. Remember, I watched this out of sequence, so I started with the most heavy one and then kind of worked back. The second season was very, very light when you think about it. Like the Match Made in Heaven one surprised me a lot. I didn't know most things in that, but it still was kind of light up until it wasn't. When it got kind of heavy. The Montreal Screwjob one, I think, is the weakest of the whole lot.
That's interesting. Yes, they were light. Since you mentioned they were light, I will probably make jokes during this, or there'll probably be banter between Derek and I. And I just want to clarify something. These are really super serious topics that are very dark.
They are.
So when we are laughing, know that it's not coming from a place of vitriol, or we're not actually mocking the situations themselves. I feel like I should give a disclaimer here because I know what's going to happen, and I don't want it to come across that way. So, a little disclaimer. The thoughts of myself are not necessarily the views of myself.
Look, and when I say light, I mean
it's like New Jack. It's like New Jack had to have the disclaimers for Smoky Mountain Wrestling. That's
exactly like in context. When I say light, I mean it's light compared to a double murder suicide or New Jack trying to kill someone or assassinations. Like these are all covered. So
and me laughing about that. It's craziness.
So like a work shoot, and the Montreal Screwjob, in my opinion, was probably a work shoot.
Really?
Yeah.
You're one of those guys, to quote Jim Cornette.
Well, no, I actually we did a show, The Desk, we actually interviewed the guy who did the documentary on it. And it's a
Wrestling with Shadows?
No. The documentary that believes the Montreal Screwjob was a work shoot. And it's 4.5 hours. I don't know where that show is. If I find it, I'll post it. But the documentary is 4.5 hours. And it does kind of lay out a lot where you're like, you know what? There's more to this. But it wouldn't shock me. But as far as, that compared to the horrific history of the Von Erichs, which is just they're cursed, man. They pissed off somebody.
Well, yeah, if I've learned anything, it's that wrestlers are cursed, for sure.
It's it's crazy.
Maybe perhaps you shouldn't do copious amounts of cocaine in the terms of a cereal bowl's worth. I learned maybe that's a bad thing to do.
I can't believe someone had a cereal bowl of cocaine, but they did. That was just, and he took it out so casually. He was like, "Here you go. Do you want some?" It's like, whoa, okay.
I was trying to do wild. The math in my head, and I couldn't even, not even know what the current price is, but I'm just like, I'm thinking in Scarface, because I mean, it literally is that comical. It's like a Scarface comical amount.
They actually had your.
We're talking about the.
Well, they had your man who's
on episode 5, which is the mysterious death of Gorgeous Gino.
Exactly, but here's the thing: your man who Scarface is based on is in that episode.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So it's kind of like, and apparently there's a thing.
Oh.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, right. That's
Yeah.
that's it. Like that's when I was watching that, I'm like, oh man, this is so deep and so dark. So yeah, like look, Montreal Screwjob. It's like the only person really upset by this is Bret Hart. If he is upset about it, he got paid millions of dollars. So
He did. There's no question that he made a huge payday out of it. But actually, what I got out, see, like we were saying earlier, Vice definitely has a bias in everything that they do. And
yeah,
it doesn't necessarily even have to be, oh, there was like a left leaning, not even that.
no,
Well, even watching this documentary, you could tell, okay, they like this person and they
yeah,
don't like that person.
yeah.
A great example of this is the Montreal Screwjob.
Mm.
For the first time in my life, I felt bad for Earl Hebner.
Yes. Now, I did find it funny though that Earl Harbner was saying that, and he had a shirt for years in TNA, and he'd come out and wear it, where he's like, I screwed Brett and would sell it. So it's like, you really can't do that, Earl. Like, I was in the building when you had that shirt many times, and he'd wear the glasses and do the Bret Hart thing, and it's
Right.
like, come on,
Yeah.
man. Like, so look, the Montreal Screwjob. If anyone listening believes that it's real, cool. If anyone is like me and believes that there's more to it, also cool. But in the context of this show, it was surprising that they went for it. Like it's something milk toast that WWE would go for, and they did with their uncensored show, which is on the network, and I had the DVD of. So look, I'd say it's a unique way to look at it, but it's it is what it is. The one that surprised me straight off the bat, Dave, and I said this to you when I was watching it, was the Macho Man stuff.
Oh my
I
gosh.
didn't know
Yeah.
he did this. Like, and okay, in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't the worst thing anyone did, but
Right.
it's still pretty bad. Like, super controlling husband over his wife, where she couldn't leave the locker room without him. Like, yeah, look, that's really bad. And I just was completely unaware of it. I was like, wow, Macho Man was a bit of a dick.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's nice, and I think it's just the rose tinted glasses I was talking about at the beginning that we enjoy wrestling through. I've seen mentions here or there, but I mean they went in depth in terms of I knew about keeping her in the locker room and stuff and not letting people interact because he was jealous and paranoid and all that. But I had no idea about how closely he made her stay in like motel
Yeah.
rooms and
It-
wouldn't
it-
even let her initially interact with Linda Hogan or whatever her name is. I will say not a fan of her.
really?
I'm just not a fan of Miss Balea or however you say her
See,
last name.
I became more of a fan of her from watching this show.
That's what angered me.
And I'm
That's
like,
what angered me. I'm like, Vice likes her, and I can't
yeah,
stand her, and they're portraying her in this
it's such
positive
a
light, and it's
positive light. Yeah,
infuriating me.
right. Like I watched Hogan Knows Best. I'm like, oh, she's a bit of a
That's
so and so,
exactly what. That's
right?
exactly why I can't stand
And I'm
her.
like, I know what she's like. And then I'm watching this, and she comes out, and she looks about 20 years younger, and she's super nice, and was like, hold on a minute, what happened here?
Yeah.
You're not the same person. Like, this is crazy, But I will have
Did
to.
you catch? Did
Sorry,
you
go on.
catch kind of a veil of a lot of the comments she said about Elizabeth? She was also kind of talking about herself.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that definitely came across to me when it came to stuff that they had to do
Yeah.
as the wives.
The wives, yeah, I had to
Yeah.
paint down, clean off the blood, and
Yeah.
everything she said. It was like, this is about you.
Yep.
Like, this is about you. This is the. But
Very self-serving.
very self-serving. Well, she's a Hogan, of course. That's just the way. Put yourself over, brother. So, but like, it was cool to learn that they did have that kind of interaction, that social circle, which was, you know, added more layers to the TV, because at that point it was real, and
Yeah.
it seems like it was more real than now, where you go on Twitter and or Instagram and they always hang out and nobody cares. But back then it was like, well, the mega powers, they actually did hang out together because it was real, right?
It was super cool to see those barbecue pics, and super cool to see the kayfabe stuff. And you could almost say that the kayfabe stuff is the reason that this entire series exists, because that you had to live your character. And I
Yeah.
know everybody listening is going, yeah, we know, but
No,
it's
but you
not
don't
like it
know.
is today.
No,
It's
but you don't.
totally different.
Yeah, like you don't know. We can say that because we're not wrestlers and we live in 2020.
Right.
These people live in the 80s, where professional wrestlers and professional wrestling was completely different. and they lived their gimmick. Like most of these, almost all of these, are like people who either got lost in their gimmick, went
Yes.
crazy because they believed their gimmick, or their gimmick was set up to fail, as in the Brawl for All.
Well,
Like,
and that's something that really hits when you
mm,
talk about that and the power of somebody like Vince McMahon and the kind of character he could give you.
mm,
Like now I kind of have a better instinct when it comes to people saying this is how Vince would screw with guys.
yeah,
Because yeah, if you have to live this character, he's basically telling you this is your life.
yeah, this is your life now. This is what you do. And it's like, on the one hand, can you feel sorry for millionaires? And on the other hand, you still have to feel sorry for people.
Exactly.
And that's the struggle that you kind of have when you're watching this. You're like, and to be fair to Vice, they very seldomly go, oh, I feel sorry for the millionaires. Like, no, these are people. And case in
Yeah.
point there, with the Hulk Hogan stuff, like that man has more money than we'll ever comprehend.
No, he doesn't though.
No, Linda McMahon. I mean, sorry, Linda McMahon has more money than we
Oh,
comprehend because of the loss, because of the divorce and that. And you still feel sorry for her, but you're like, you never have to work ever again. Like
no,
you're
you
set
never
for
have to
life.
work again. I think she ended up better than Hogan in the divorce. Don't
She
even
did.
ask me how that's
No,
possible.
she did. She did. And you still feel sorry for her. It's the same thing with,
No, I
you know,
don't. I still can't stand her.
fair.
I mean, Vice, thanks for putting a great series together, but she genuinely seems like a terrible person.
But
She
yeah,
needs to chill on the Botox. If we could
she's a.
start there.
To be fair, she doesn't look as bad. There was one woman on the show, and I don't remember which one was on, and I was terrified every time she came on the screen. She looked like a cat lady. I'm like, what happened? Like, what did you do?
are, are you talking about, this is going to sound awful if I'm hitting this wrong. Are you talking about Dino Bravo's mom?
No, no, it wasn't Dino Bravo. It wasn't. It was earlier. It was way earlier on. It was. I think it was in the Gino Hernandez episode or the Bruiser Brody one. I can't remember
Okay.
which one. But a woman showed up, and it just terrified the hell out of me. She was someone's wife, and
Oh, okay,
and she
okay.
found the body. So I don't remember which one it was exactly. But
Oh,
man, I it was the 80s. The 80s were wild
80s.
apparently, and we didn't even realize this. I did enjoy the fact that there were some topics that I wasn't overly familiar with, like a good few of them. And hello to everybody in the chat, guys. If you want to comment, feel free. What was your favorite episode of Dark Side of the Ring? Let us know. Yeah, so I wasn't over familiar with the Von Erichs, like how dark that was, how unlucky they were. I wasn't over familiar with Gorgeous Gino, and I wasn't over familiar with Bruiser Brody. Right, New Jack, I knew a fair bit about, but holy cow, that man, that man is crazy. Like I'm sorry, like I never want to be near New Jack ever.
No.
Like I feel too close to him now, and I'm over across a different country in a quarantine lockdown stay, and I'm still afraid that New Jack is going to find me. Like holy cow, man, that's crazy.
I have had the privilege, shall we say, of watching like straight shoots that New Jack's done.
Right.
Like 3 hour long, 4 hour long, and I've watched at least three or four of them. And let me tell you, what they presented in the Vice documentary was tame
Yeah.
compared to the stories this guy will tell about himself. For example, as we, as most people know, the term for a female fan who hangs around with the wrestlers, blah, blah, as a ring rat. Well, New Jack would take this to a whole nother level. He just would have no such little respect that his way of making a living, because we were talking about, do you feel bad for millionaires? Not everybody was a millionaire. You also have people like New Jack who they're making some money, but relatively, what do they have left? And
Yeah.
by this point, he's working the indie scene. And he was talking about how in like the ECW days, he would get a girl, a ring rat, to hook up with him just so he could get her credit card information so
Oh
that he
my
could
god.
buy stuff and
Yeah.
then dump her and then move on to the next one. Like this is the level of human being that we're talking about. And Vice
Yeah.
humanized him.
Yeah. They
And
did.
they humanized Benoit and they humanized some of these people. That was surprising to me.
Well, one thing.
Um,
One thing that happened when I was watching the New Jack episode. Do you remember the episode of the rest of you TNA Hard Justice 2010 show?
that was the Jeff Hardy show, right?
No, that was the ECW reunion show.
Oh, okay. Yes, yes, yes.
Hunter Golden's rant on New Jack, where he's like, "You just New Jack, you just can't get him." It's like I was just laughing the entire time because I'm just like, now that makes a lot more sense of what he was talking about. That New Jack is such an undervalued, like he's toxic. He's completely toxic, and
Completely
it makes
toxic.
sense now.
Absolutely.
And for TNA to bring someone who is completely toxic onto it adds dimension. So what? 10 years later, I finally get why that was really really funny. Outside of Hunter Golden's rant, which are also amazing.
Yeah.
So
That was it was it's definitely surprising the way that because they could have portrayed him worse, I would say, but overall it wasn't bad. I he's a very entertaining character.
he is.
But really what stood out to me is from that particular episode is how much of a ridiculous racist Jim Cornette is.
Well, yeah, he got fired for
Oh my.
he got fired from NWA Power for saying something incredibly racist.
Well, I mean, but the way Vice was presenting it and talking about the way that New Jack was being booked in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and for those unaware, he would go out there and praise OJ, and they did Rodney King angles, but Jim Cornette was the mind behind this, and he
Mm.
was literally putting him and his partner out there to get racial slurs thrown at them because he's like, oh, I can make money off of racism. That was the promotion that Jim Cornette was
Look,
running,
man,
and I,
that's look. It's cheap heat.
but there's yeah, but you're right. It's cheap heat. It wasn't. Oh, it was weird heat, and I had thought kind of in the first season of watching a show like, oh, Jim Cornette, Vice seems to be on his side. They're presenting him well, and as somebody who's always been a Vince Russo fan, I was like,
He comes off
But I'll
very
tell you
bad.
what,
Yeah,
by the end of what I've seen of season 2, you're like,
yeah.
Jim Cornette is kind of a scumbag, and I'm okay with that
Well, look,
because like the feud, one of the things that we were talking about that you were kind of teasing me to reel me in to get me to watch the Dark Side of the Ring was the back and forth that they had on like the Montreal Screwjob and the Brawl
brawl
for
for
All
all. Yeah.
episodes, especially. And Vince Russo's stance is kind of, can we just, this isn't, I don't really care. And Jim Cornette's thought that I'm going to piss on your grave and do all this stuff. I'm just like, and Vince Russo doesn't care at all at this
Which
point,
is
it seems.
no, I do like Vince Russo just like this is still entertaining, and you're like, it's like
Yeah, that was the best part of
it's
the
just,
film. It's like, honestly, I still enjoy this.
I still enjoy this, and I'm like, oh man, like, see, it humanizes everybody to the point where you're like, people make bad decisions, but
Yes.
it's if you stick by them or not, and I think like Russo has already said what he doesn't like and what he would have done differently. But all for all, to be fair, like it, I didn't realize it killed so many careers.
Right. I did not realize that. I also didn't
I did,
realize
yeah.
that it wasn't, for some reason, it was a pay-per-view in my head. I didn't realize
No, it
it
was
took
on
place
Raw.
over 2 months.
Yeah.
It's funny how when I go back and I look at things from, my childhood, I mean, I was what, 6 years old when this happened, 8 years old.
Yeah, same.
So I guess I forgot, obviously, but I did not know, like you're saying, yeah, how many careers it ruined. They were talking about people getting their hamstrings pulled and all this.
One thing I didn't know, and I went back and watched it on the network. I didn't realize Doctor Death was there for so long. Like he wasn't there for ages, but he had some hardcore matches and stuff like this, and I'm like, oh yeah, him and Jim Ross had a whole thing, and now this makes sense. They were kind of building him towards this big thing, but again, watching him, like to be fair, my biggest memory of Doctor Death was playing WWE Attitude and being like, who the hell
Yes.
is Doctor Death?
Yeah, no, it's fair.
It's like what is that's his biggest impact in me as you said, an 8-year-old.
Yeah, it's that to me was. I think that's why this is great, and it's one of the things we have been getting to at the end of the show. Is
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of curious what of our modern day storylines and angles will we do seeing Dark Side of the Ring episodes for 20 years from now or 25 years from now. I think it'd be a cool thing to get into.
Yeah, we'll get into that near the end of the show,
Um,
I think. And it's but look with New Jack, his you know I did feel horrible for the abuse that was thrown at him by crowds. Like, I can only imagine what that would feel like. That's horrible. But one thing that I've seen that, with cheapy, I think, when does cheapy go too far? I think there's a case in point, right? But
Right.
at the same time, you know, flamboyant wrestlers would get called. You know what they get called, and they went into
Right.
that bit as well. Um, but even nowadays, when you go to wrestling shows in Ireland, if an English wrestler is wrestling, guess what the promo is going to be towards an Irish crowd? So it's like, have we really got past this, or are we still kind of there? That's the
Yeah.
thing. Like, cheap by its definition is cheap, and the
Right.
cheapest way to do stuff is by lowest common denominator, and that's what it is. But I couldn't believe that people were doing that. I'm like,
I think
really? A crowd just called you that, and
it,
you
it
just
doesn't
still went? You know?
doesn't shock me based on. See, it's not that I'm upset about the cheap heat. I'm upset about the fact that Jim Cornette throughout this entire series is trying to paint himself as this brilliant mastermind, when at the end of the day, all he was doing was saying, "Go piss off some white people so I can make money and pay you just a tiny amount."
Yeah, true
Like,
racism, which
yeah,
is which is crazy. And it's like, I don't know, man. Like,
I don't know what was crazier. Is it crazier that Jim Cornette was spending a lot of time profiting in the 90s off of racism, or is it crazier that him and Vince Russo were fighting over who came up with the job to do the Montreal screw job? I don't
right?
know.
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
Like, it's again. It's like, there's so much in this. There's so many, like, layers to this, that there's the actual event. There's how it was covered, and then there's the people talking about it. And the people talking about it is the thing that surprised me most.
Yes.
With Vince Russo and Jim Cornette, I'm like, wow, you guys still, like, well, less so Vince Russo, but Jim Cornette's like, he still believes wrestling is real, even though
He
he knows
does.
it's not. And you're like, bro, it's not real. Like, stop.
People might not be aware of this, but that video of the fat kid in the crowd crying, saying it's still real to me, damn it, that's actually Jim Cornette. It's
But it
true.
makes
It's
sense.
in the
It's
Bible.
it's
That's actually Jim Cornette.
it's the same mentality. Like, when you're watching him and he's like going off on these mad ones, and you're like, listen, it's not 1986 anymore. It's not 1970. You know, the world's moved on. One thing, when he's walking through his museum, there's just loads of
Yes.
videotapes. I'm like, man, you need to let this go at some point. Sell that to Vince, and
Yeah,
buy
yeah.
yourself a skybox or an internet connection. You know, it's just, I couldn't believe it. I was like,
It's
it's so crazy. It's so crazy. Um,
But yeah,
poor
to
guy,
circle
poor guy.
back, like we were saying, because I know we're sorry, fans, I know we're going wildly out of order, but that's kind of the best way I think to treat this,
Mm.
because there's intertwining things that go between all of them. But
Yeah,
the yeah, Bruiser Brody is one that we touched on very briefly, saying we didn't know that much about,
yeah.
and that is one where there have long been books written about it, tons of articles out there,
Mm.
and I just never read them. I just never looked into them. Um, it's kind of this dark story where, see, Vice made it really clear who killed Bruiser Brody,
Yeah.
or allegedly, or whatever.
They also kind
But
of did.
that's not the impression that I've gotten over the years. I've always
Yeah.
been under the impression that it's kind of a mystery who actually did it. So I don't know if
They're-
Vice was.
Again,
I don't know.
Vice are pushing a narrative through all this.
Yes. And that's
And
something you have to keep in mind, because that was one of the other things I was wondering is, are they going to get into all the different, for lack of a better term, conspiracy theories that exist about wrestling when it comes to things like the Montreal Screwjob, which they lightly touched on, but
yes,
Bruiser Brody, Chris Benoit, certainly. I mean, they hinted, they did a little hint
well,
by
see,
mentioning Kevin Sullivan, but
they
so
did.
I
See,
wasn't sure how they would take it. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't sure what the presentation would be.
that's what surprised me. The Kevin Sullivan stuff. I was like, well, are they going there? Because if they go,
Yes, yeah.
that would be huge. But, like, we already know that the next two episodes are going to be the Road Warriors and Owen Hart.
Yeah, I don't know how I'm going to do that Owen Hart episode.
Yeah, so the second season, I would say, for anyone who wants to get in, it is heavy. It's very, very heavy. But
Actually,
and
the next episode they're doing is the because they have 4 more left.
They do. They have
Yeah,
David Slutz and Harold Adams
and the
and
Slap Heard
the
Around the World, which
yeah,
is next week, and then
yeah,
the Herb Abrams story. I don't actually know at all, so that'll be interesting. But David Schultz, of course, that's he slapped Geraldo Rivero and like messed his ear up,
yep,
and that was the whole is wrestling real thing. But
yep,
let's not get to what hasn't happened yet. Let's stay with what has.
yeah,
Yeah, it started kind of light. Well, I mean, I don't know if you call light the match made in heaven, but you're right. Season 1 was light,
mm,
and then man, they hit you hard with Bruiser Brody, and then
yeah.
they hit you even harder with the Von Erichs. I will say, is it? I don't know if it's just that I'm a wrestling fan and I remember these certain things from my child. When I saw Macho Man and they superhumanized him to the point of saying how paranoid he was and that this was the first time he showed real emotion. Damn it, if I didn't get a little teary when Miss Elizabeth came back and saved him in the clip in a documentary.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certain things, like I think it was Cornette that said it, or no, it was Bruce Pritchard said, "We got him." Well, they still got me. It's
Yeah.
still a moment that every time I watch, I'm just like, oh, the
Man,
feels.
see, when wrestling is real, or when wrestling feels real, when wrestling is good, it's great. When wrestling is bad, it's terrible.
Oh yeah.
And it's. I enjoyed that episode despite what I learned about, and I still like the Macho Man. I didn't really lose any respect for as such. Instead of being just surprised by that, heartbroken by the end of it with how she died. I was like, wow, I did not know that.
Ooh,
Again, like,
yeah, and I wasn't expecting them to bring in Eric Bischoff to talk about
yeah,
talking to Lex, and
yeah,
oh,
that whole thing just surprised me. Um, I felt really sorry for the Von Erichs the whole time. I was like, you guys, man, a horror, like heartbreaking, like no attachment to them at all, except for Lacey Von Erich, obviously. But yeah, man, like I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, you guys got the worst hand ever. Like, it was one of the biggest line for me was when he was saying, I started off with 4 brothers and now I have none, and I was just like, oh wow, that's rough, so rough. One that I heard about, and obviously I knew the background of, but wasn't overly familiar with, was the Fabulous Moolah episode.
yeah. And I'll tell you what, after watching the episode, WWE put her name back on that tournament.
Did they?
No, I'm saying they should.
Oh,
I
okay,
came I came out
okay,
on Fabulous Moolah's side.
really, okay,
I just given into the Reddit, Twitter, wrestling media hype at the time of, oh, she's so bad, she's this terrible, blah blah blah. But I don't know. I guess, was she bad to certain people? Did she? Absolutely. But it seems like the majority of women that worked with her didn't really have a bad thing to say because they wouldn't have even had jobs without her. I mean, it's people don't. Yes, should Wendy Richter have gotten the title? Probably. But I don't
um,
know. It just.
yeah.
You disagree. I can tell. I can tell you disagree. You're like, I hate Fabulous Moolah
No,
now after seeing
no,
this.
I don't hate her. I don't hate her. I do think no, 'cause she just did what Hulk Hogan did. Really,
Yeah.
she really did. Like, from there's two ways to look at it. There's the trainer. Again, context is king, right? So there's the
Right.
trainer, there's the wrestler, and then there's the legacy. She probably did nothing any different than most trainers would do. In fact, she said as much with the men to ren those territories. Didn't make it right, but that's just what happened back then, by the sounds of it, right? I find that abhorrent though, the pimping out and stuff like that. That's just awful. But you know,
Certainly.
I think a lot of
But
that was overblown as such in
that
the media, which was, there was only one girl who said that it was presented, and she said no. And the other one of the other girls was like, "Yeah, I really don't like that she's been called a pimp because then it makes me sound like I was a prostitute." And you're like, "Oh well,
exactly.
so that must have been overblown. So maybe she didn't do what she was been
That's
told."
what I was trying to hit on
Yeah,
with my discombobulated sentences I was stringing together was that, yeah, I didn't get the impression after watching the episode that I thought she was like selling girls for like drugs and pimping them out so that she could get jobs and all that. That's not at all. I mean, what, there were 20 women that said Moolah did not do anything point blank. And then you
Mm,
had, then there was, what was her, the sensational Georgia Brown or something her name was the only person really that was in the documentary that said, no, she did do these horrible things, blah, blah, blah. And so I don't know how you balance it, but I don't think it is as detrimental as I don't know what I mean. I don't know. Vice obviously definitely had a bias here too, and maybe they get me. Maybe they're sucking me in, and I'm falling for it. I don't know. I don't know. I shouldn't be offering an opinion on something that I wasn't there for, so I
mm.
don't. You know, I don't want to
Yeah,
overstep that, but
yeah. Like I agree. It's you know, one thing I would have to say, what her impact on wrestling is what she should be known for, and by underdoing the whole Wendy Ricker thing, that's what she really should be lionized for because she did destroy it. But then WWE can't have their cake and eat it too when they're castigating her for that and they
yeah,
prop up Hulk Hogan.
right.
So it's like, it's a hard call, but I would agree. I think a review of her legacy should be done. But if you're
Mhm.
going to hold her to a certain standard, hold Hogan to the same standard because he did the exact same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also there's an ingrained part of me that my childhood was seeing her and Mae Young take bumps when they were in their 70s. Like, it's ridiculous. But those are really fond memories that I have. So to kind of take that away and to take away the kind of stuff that she did for wrestling. Now, this isn't in the same light, so this might sound like a weird jump that I'm about to make, but that was actually my biggest takeaway from the Chris Benoit series was how much I don't know what should I call her, Nancy Sullivan, Nancy Benoit. I don't know. I feel like Chris Jericho right now.
Yeah,
Nancy
it's hard.
Benoit, 100% woman, should be in the WWE Hall of Fame, and she never will.
No.
And I never thought about her in
Mm,
that way up until watching that episode. And I thought Vice did a great job of focusing on her.
yeah. Yeah.
I was like, oh crap. Yeah, you're right. She was
It's
actually a pioneer that we can't even discuss.
well, it makes her a person,
Yes.
which she wasn't for a while. And obviously because it's, you know, what happened kind of overshadowed everything in wrestling and in the actual business itself and in the wider world. Like you say Chris Benoit to somebody and nobody thinks, oh, that great wrestler. No, you think murderer. And then when you think Nancy Benoit, you don't think pioneer. You think victim.
Yeah.
One of the things I did feel sorry for was, well, everybody. Chris
Yeah. I
Jericho
mean,
was in
yeah.
bits. Chris Jericho was in bits. David
And
Ben.
credit to Jericho
Oh
for what
yeah,
he
for
did.
for holding it together, like it was really good. You know.
I mean, I love the part like you were just going to touch on the son, I think is where you were going.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the fact that he was able to get Chris Benoit's surviving son along with Nancy's sister together. And that was a side story I had no idea about that they hadn't spoken to each other in 13 years because each person's family told them
Yeah.
that they didn't want to be involved. And for Jericho, there was a great moment, if great's the word to use, but there was a great moment where the documentary you realized, oh, I'm watching a documentary because the son starts to cry and the cameramen even like come forward and they the camera itself pulls back and you realize, oh, they've been filming this whole documentary in the same house, just in different chairs in different rooms. Everybody's actually all here
All
while they're
here.
talking about this.
Yeah.
And sorry, and so Jericho, to come in and give him a hug and uh but then they brought sister and they just had this moment that oh it hit me hard that moment.
Yeah. It was very difficult. Like it was. I don't think as a wrestling fan we've really been able to come to terms with what actually happened, and this is the first time that it's actually been done. You
Yeah,
know.
it's definitely, I mean, aside from the ICP song, This is the first time
I, I
it's
mean,
really
like,
been done.
really, really kind of
No,
they
yeah.
went from all sides. But you can say that for everything, like and I will say it's worth a watch, but it's not an easy
Oh
watch.
yeah. But
It's not.
don't start with it. I
No, that
actually
was my
watched.
mistake.
I actually ended up watching those two last. Now that I remember, I skipped them
Mm.
when I started season 2 because I knew it would be hard to get into. And there was one moment where the son said that only Chris Jericho and Chavo even paid attention to me or called me. Like that's how ingrained into the WWE mindset everybody was. They wouldn't even reach out to this kid that had been around them. It's like it's like Nick and Brooke of the Hogans, where they were surrounded by the WWE family. And to just, oh well, we can't talk about your dad, so screw you. Kind of remember, for if you live in the U.S., you know about Pete Rose. Obviously, his son, phenomenal baseball player.
Hmm.
Nobody would draft him. Nobody would sign him to his team because of
Pete Rose.
because
Yeah.
of the stuff that his dad did. And that's kind of the feeling I got for Benoit's son, and I felt that. And you can't. I mean, you look at his son, and it's Benoit's son. He doesn't even
Yeah.
need to tell you his name.
No, you can see
So
he looks exactly like him, like
freaky almost.
exactly like him, and
Yeah.
it's hard, because it's like, should the sins of the father be carried out on the son? No, that's not fair. But in wrestling, the only thing you could do is put him under a mask, but then you're gonna have douchers in the crowd saying God knows what.
There's no
There's no way out. Like
there's no way.
there's no way to do it. Like you, well,
One of
actually, you could do it now because there's no crowd.
yeah, that's true.
Literally,
This is actually the only time that
this is
it would
yeah.
be
You
possible.
could actually do it now, but it's in poor taste. It's like Owen Hart. If Owen Hart's kids wanted to wrestle, it's unfair, and it's not a good precedent to set. But it is what it is. It's the inescapable legacy. Sure, look, all right. He went to WWE. What would Vince do?
Vince being Vince would turn it into an
To an
angle.
angle, and that's the problem. Like, sure,
That's the problem.
like Eddie Guerrero's death was turned into an angle. Um, I'm amazed on Hart's death wasn't put into an angle. We've
I
seen
think
this.
it was I think the lawsuit's the only thing that kept it from being turned into an angle, quite frankly.
That's fair enough, and it's just I
I
don't want to see
even get
that.
a little upset at Rey Mysterio. Well, not anymore, but when it first happened, when he started doing the frog splash and stuff, and we
Yeah,
started
that
pointing
was
the sign to Eddie, it was
very
almost
yeah.
too. And that obviously that's complete love and respect and all that, but still that was tough to watch. And also seeing this reminded me of why we don't get these tribute shows anymore.
Yeah, exactly,
Because
because
I yeah
I remember that. I
yeah
remember that happening. I was sitting in my room. This one. I was, playing. I think it was PlayStation at that point, and
yeah
heard about it on WrestleView, and yeah, I was watching Raw, and no Raw, just this tribute show to Chris Benoit, and I was just like, oh wow, I've never seen this before. Obviously there was Eddie Guerrero stuff, but
right.
I was
But that's what
never.
I'm saying. We used to get them with like
We used
Eddie Guerrero, and we're never going to get that. I mean, Roman. Well, I guess Roman Reigns got flex. I mean, something could happen to Seth Rollins tomorrow, and they're not going to do a 3-hour show for him.
no.
You know what I mean? It's
The most you'll get will be a tribute like Howard Finkel last week on
right.
Raw, and that's about it. Like, but you won't get these big shows, and I think it's because well, I don't think I guarantee it's because of this. They never want to be,
Absolutely.
but then again, if they had just waited, they wouldn't have been caught with their pants down. You know?
But that's what's so bizarre for me is just I don't know. I don't know. It's such a hard topic to discuss. But you're right. They didn't have all the information, but at the same time, I mean, as soon as you heard it, but I'm putting myself back into my shoes of when I found out we didn't have all the information. We never
No.
suspected it. If you
Oh no.
look at it from the outside, your first instinct, especially in today's world where we have the ID channel and everybody's into murders and all that nonsense, like that's entertainment, is, all that, you would immediately jump to, oh, double murder, suicide. But
Yeah.
for some reason, we were all in such disbelief, I guess, that we didn't accept it. that we went along with the tribute show. I don't know.
It was because I remember. Well, as I said, you know, you remember where you were at 9/11. You
Yeah,
remember well. I remember where I was when I found out Chris Mawa died. It was. I'm not saying they're comparable because they're not. But for what I was 14 then, I think 14,
yeah,
13,
I think we were about
14,
14.
15,
This
in
was
around then.
2000, 2004, right? 2005.
Yeah, so I was like, I was in middle, what you call middle school, when 9/11 happened, 7th grade, and I was
Were we?
couple of
Yeah, we
years,
were. We're
yeah.
seventh grade. Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, so couple of years after that. So I still remember, and as a kid, just being like, "Oh my god, this is unbelievable! Like, I can't believe this." So yeah, it was one of those things where you were grief stricken because someone, a wrestler who you watched and admired, that did it, was dead. But then when you found out, just the absolute shock and horror, and that's one thing
Yeah.
that really came across in the episode, the absolute abject horror of everybody. But then again, you're watching it and you're like, yeah, this guy was so intense. And then you watch his matches, you're like, he's a killer, like, and it was kind of
Yeah.
like, what happened? And then they go into the whole brain stuff, and
Yes, I
you
love
know,
that they brought in Chris Nowinski. I love
yeah,
that they did CT. I want to correct myself. 2007, not 2004.
no,
But yeah, what man, it's so tough because I think Chris Jericho talked about it, and I agree with him 100%. That one of the greatest moments in, I think it was him, it doesn't matter. One of the greatest moments in wrestling history, and you could argue in television history, was WrestleMania 20's ending.
yeah,
That was iconic. That as a fan, as a kid, I mean, that hooked me. I was probably crying. I cried over an episode of Smallville, so I'm not afraid to say that I've cried because of wrestling. But to see Eddie and Benoit embrace as champions in that ring in Madison Square Garden,
mm,
which back then still meant something to wrestling.
yeah,
It just, oh my gosh, seeing that confetti stream down, I remember where I was when I watched that match. That's
right.
how iconic it was to me.
That was 2004, wasn't it?
That's why I was thinking 2004 in my
You
head.
see,
Yeah,
the weird
well, it
thing
might have
about
been 2005.
here's the weird thing about that, right? Com- uh, Separately from probably every other wrestling fan who does the podcast, or even who's super into wrestling, I don't have that attachment to Eddie Guerrero, and I'll tell you why. Tell you why.
Oh, this is gonna be interesting.
I wasn't watching wrestling then. This was during my break. I stopped watching wrestling at the very beginning of 2003 and came back for ECW 2005 and fully came back 2006.
Okay,
So
interesting.
so this whole period for me, like including the SmackDown 6, SmackDown 7, all that stuff,
Wow.
just it has absolutely no doesn't have that impact because I wasn't watching. I've gone back and watched it
Mm,
since. I respect the Guerrero for what he did in that, but that whole time period, it's just not there for me. And it's
interesting.
weird, right? So I don't
Yeah.
have it. I just don't have it.
Huh. I mean, everybody has their time periods. For me, it was 20, I would say 2014 to like 2017, 2018. I kind of took a break from wrestling. So
Yeah,
I totally get what you mean.
yeah.
But for me, actually, my one of my best friends, actually the person who introduced me to WrestleView as a site itself, which
Mm,
led, led to us sitting here having this conversation,
yep.
got me back into wrestling when I was in middle school, and then this that WrestleMania was the first one that he and I watched together, WrestleMania 20. So for me, it has so many fond memories because it was when I was just getting my zeal back. I mean, the last time I had watched wrestling really was I as a kid, like in the early 90s, because my parents were kind of like, we don't know how we feel about this Attitude Era stuff. So unless I was at my grandparents, where my grandfather, bless him, would like order WCW pay-per-views for me to watch. You're right. There's certain time periods that you don't necessarily connect with. Now and this is going to probably sound awful to people, but I was just never a fan of Eddie Guerrero in general. He
Same,
just, I never connected to him.
same. I never
And
connected to him. Yeah,
but
like
I still knew about the connections, so
right.
that what
That's
got
what did
me.
it. That's what got
And
you
I,
in.
I
Yeah.
don't know if I'll have another chance to mention. So I want to tag on to the whole thinking about Chris Benoit. You immediately go, murder. But for me, it is that stands out. And I will openly admit to anybody that one of my favorite live match I've ever seen was at a house show. It was when Chris Benoit was champion and he had a match against Kane. And for
Mm.
whatever reason, they had a 5-star match in front of a very small crowd that night.
See, that's the thing. Like Benoit did connect with me. He wasn't my favorite wrestler by any stretch of imagination, but I love the stuff in WCW. I love this feud with Chris Jericho because Chris Jericho is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. So obviously, you know,
Yes.
obviously, um, but with Eddie Guerrero, it just wasn't there. Like, yeah, he did the Mamacita thing with China, and then that was it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I had taken a break then, and I was like, he came back, and I'm like, oh, Eddie, and then I remember hearing he died, and I was like, oh, that's sad. And then I'd come back to watch wrestling,
Wow, yeah.
and then yeah,
I
it just
remember the
hit.
shock of that one
So
too, because
yeah.
that was another one where you felt bad because this was a guy who it was a great example of you can do whatever you want in your life to clean yourself up, but if you spend years and years and years abusing drugs and steroids, it's the tolls already been taken on your body and you can drop
what
in an
shocked
instant.
what shocked me about it was the fact that it wasn't the first time he'd overdosed. The fact that it'd been 2 or 3 times,
And
and
let's
that
point out this wasn't a relapse or an overdose. This
no,
was,
this
but
was just his heart giving out. But
yeah,
he had actually overdosed and relapsed, and this comes from
right.
Vicky Guerrero, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my god, like he nearly died 2 or 3 times beforehand, and yeah, he
And she
was
just
still,
left
and
him
she
on
just
the.
left him.
Oh my gosh! Well,
For me, Dave, that was the biggest revelation of the whole series. I was like, you just left him to die.
I was shocked
That was
because
unbelievable.
that's almost. I mean, in the U.S., I mean, you'd never try somebody for something like that. I don't think based on what they say in a documentary, but I think it can always be considered criminal negligence.
Well, look, I can understand why she did it because it
Oh
happened so
yeah,
many times before,
I'm with
and
you. Don't get me
and
wrong, but I just want to.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I don't necessarily blame her. Like she's not a villain in any stretch of imagination. It was just a wife being so just beat down and from it. But for me, that was the thing that shocked me most of the whole series. I actually my mouth was on the floor when she said
I,
that. Um,
and she was so honest. Well, that's one thing. So many of these interviews were so honest about it. That certainly shocked me. I was surprised. I didn't know that he had had instances of collapsing or like nodding out leading
yeah,
up to his death.
yeah. It's like to be
Like, why
fair,
wasn't he given the care of that? Like that.
was
That shocked me.
well, see, a different time. That's the
Yeah.
thing, different time. Like if that happened now, obviously he'd be. We saw what
Right.
happened with Roman Reigns, but we've seen what happened with Roman Reigns where he's blacklisted. So how
Yeah.
much has changed, right? Like really, this is what I want to bring back to. You were saying, near the end of the show, whose story do you think we'll have in the future? Well, Roman Reigns is going to be one because we're probably never going to see Roman Reigns in the ring again.
That,
A
yeah,
WWE ring.
and they can bring in so much stuff when you consider like not like flying his family in for that WrestleMania. He was supposed to beat Brock Lesnar, and then he doesn't beat him. And like there was like 30 members of his family there or something. Yeah, it was. I think you'd get. Well, I want to add in one more thing before we jump to that, which is that. And yes, guys, there's episodes that we couldn't get to and we had to skip over. I mean, we
Yeah,
could spend a show talking about each
each
one of
one.
these episodes. That's how
Yeah,
good it was.
yeah,
One of the things that I loved is we were talking about how you have to put yourself in the time period. Context is important. Well, also, I love listening to the Carney talk
yeah.
and the fact that this is how they just talk in real life.
Real life. Yeah,
When they mention things, Linda, obviously, it came across really strong because you were like, wow, they really didn't smarten you up. And then in
no.
my head, I'm like, who am I to say smarten you up? I'm not a wrestler. I don't have the right to. But yeah, they would talk about but they didn't explain to the audience what these terms meant.
No.
They just presented them. Like, for instance, during the Macho Man, Randy Savage, and Jake the Snake bit, they were asking, like, is the snake fixed?
Mm.
Well, I guess if you're just watching a documentary, clearly this is for a wrestling audience, but if you're just watching a documentary as a person, you might think, oh, I guess that means
Neutered.
has the venom been, has it
Yeah.
been neutered or the venom's been taken out? But in wrestling, we all know what the word fixed means. It means something's gimmicked.
Yeah.
I'm using another wrestling term. It means that something
It's
is
not real.
manipulated in a way where
Yeah,
it's
it's
not
not
real,
real. Yeah.
essentially. So I love that. I loved all the Carney talk that was through it, because that to me was what really hooked me in and said, wow, these people live this life. They
Yeah.
live the carnival world. I mean,
See,
maybe it's the juggler in me that super appreciates it,
but
but
that's
wow,
wrestling. Wrestling
yeah.
is like, and look, anytime I watch wrestling with my dad, he's like, they really are just a bunch of carnies, aren't they? I'm like, yeah, literally, literally, it's what it is. You can take the person out of the carnival, but you can't take the carnival out of the person, and that's just wrestling. That's what it is. You know,
And yet Kizarny didn't work as a character.
which I only found about recently too. Can't
Oh,
believe
you
that.
didn't know that?
I
Oh
didn't
my
know that was a
gosh.
thing.
I
I didn't
loved
know.
him.
I only found it out like 2 weeks ago,
Kizarny.
like till 3 days ago. I was like, oh my god, we need to talk about this at some point.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the topic.
Kazarni. Wow.
I
Um,
think you could do a whole thing on talk about future. I think you could do a whole thing on CM Punk.
yeah.
And not just the whole leaving and coming back, but certainly the lawsuit, and then
Yeah.
you can get into the Colt Cabana nonsense
Yeah.
of, oh yeah, you're an indie wrestler, but I'm worth 20 million, but I'm not going to pay for your legal fees, even though you're only in this mess because
See,
I said stuff in your show. I was
I,
like, what?
I think CM Punk would be a two-parter
Yeah.
because there's so much there.
Yeah, and I don't think he would have any qualms about going on and talking.
No.
But that's what I was watching this, and I was trying to figure out is, do we have as much of these stories nowadays?
Yeah.
Because wrestling's not real.
Here's the thing.
It wasn't real then, but you know what I'm saying.
It's real to them, damn it. And the one that really stands out to me is TNA. The rise
Oh
of
my gosh,
the rise and fall and continuing lingerance of TNA.
I mean, you could. Jeff Hardy would have an episode.
Jeff Hardy would have an episode. Yeah, and it would be a lot better than what they're showing us on SmackDown every week in pieces, which I'm getting very sick of. That's very frustrating. You'd have one on Triple H probably as well. The backstage stuff with Triple H.
Well, you could get into the, oh my gosh, yeah, the Stephanie McMahon and Triple H, and pushing people, not pushing people, kind of. Oh,
like there's a whole
but these aren't dark enough. These aren't dark.
No, well, they're not. They're dark. Well,
that's
comparatively.
You know I mean?
Well, I think the CM Punk one is quite dark.
That is,
like that's pretty horrible. Like working a man basically, allegedly, nearly to death. Roman Reigns one is one, and I guarantee you there'll be one on COVID-19 as well on WrestleMania this year, if it was.
That was a theme that stuck out to me, was how many of these episodes had things in there where somebody, and by the way, getting Bruce Pritchard to be an interviewee is one of the biggest snags they could have gotten for this series. Talk about a guy who has knowledge about all these things. But there'd be almost every other episode, they would talk about, this is a moment that almost destroyed the wrestling industry.
Yeah.
Like the Montreal Screwjob, the things that Bret Hart did almost just like that destroyed the kind of, oh, we're little kids and wrestling's definitely real mentality. Chris Benoit, I mean, that almost shut the industry down.
Yeah. Like the Montreal Screwjob changed wrestling from what it was into what it became.
Yes.
Fundamentally. But everyone still made money. Everyone still walked out.
Much money.
Everyone still made money. Everyone still made money from the match made in heaven. Everyone still made money from the Fabulous Moolah. Everyone still made money even from the Brawl for All.
Yeah.
With Chris Benoit stuff, that nearly killed wrestling completely. Like,
very true.
Absolutely.
I mean, we wouldn't have had Stone Cold Steve Austin if there was no Montreal Screwjob.
Yep. Exactly.
It sounds crazy, but it's true, because you never would have had the Mr. McMahon character. He would have stayed behind the commentary booth. It just, I hope they do like a David Arquette episode or something in the future. I'd love, especially nowadays with him coming back.
It's funny you mentioned it. So to break the fourth wall, well, obviously not. We're streaming on Twitch and YouTube. But if you're listening if you're listening to this on the podcast, we're recording this on the 27th of April. Guess what happened 20 years ago today?
Oh, was this the night he got
This was the
speared through?
night. No, this was the night
Oh,
he won the belt. This was David Arquette's.
wow.
Yeah. So we didn't plan that,
Praise
guys.
Vince
We
Russo. That is phenomenal. This is a date that will live in infamy.
and it has, and it has. Yeah, I had to say, man, I didn't hate that as much as people.
No,
People go on,
no.
but the Brawl for All episode. If there's one you want to watch and not feel bad about, Brawl for All is the guilt
Yeah, yeah.
is the guilt free one because that's just a great L
Yes.
time.
Especially if you're like me and you hate JBL
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah,
you'll
like
love it.
yeah. No, I feel hard.
To find out the entire tournament was basically because Vince Russo's like, this guy's a jack, and we're gonna get him beat up,
Yeah,
and I can't do it, obviously. So,
gotta get someone who can. To be fair, I didn't. It makes sense because the Brawl. I remember watching a Brawl for All and being like, "This is weird. This makes no sense. Why are they doing this?" And I was like, "Oh, it was just to get JBL. Well, he deserves it. So
well,
fair."
and look at what he did at One Night Stand years
Oh
later.
man,
So
yeah, it was just like
let's have another Brawl for All and put him back in there.
who was
I care.
who was wrong here? Yeah,
Yeah.
Now to be fair, now I do feel sorry for all the lads that got screwed. Bart Gunn, his whole career just ending in an instant because of bad booking. But it was what it was, guys. The Brawl for All. That's the best episode in this if you don't want to feel sad about everything, but it's kind of hilarious at the same time. So,
but I would. What? So you think that was your favorite episode? If you don't want to feel bad, what? I know my favorite episode. Forgetting about not feeling bad about people, since this is Dark Side of the Ring, we're embracing that, and it's weird because it was the first episode. But I honestly think the Match Made in Heaven, the story of Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth,
I agree.
For as heartbreaking as it is, for as humanizing as it also was at the same time, I thought, wow, that was amazing, and what made me watch another 12 hours of Vice. So well done, Vice. You don't usually get me in for that long.
That it made me like. I agree. That was my favorite episode as well. I had the perfect mix of everything. What I will say is, it's a great place to start. I'd recommend it. Vice did a great job. Vice always do a great job as a documentary. Anytime I will watch a Vice documentary on anything, even when I know they're biased. Again, like Cyber War is fantastic. If you guys haven't seen it, Cyber War is fantastic. And that gets into the.
They did. I always recommend Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia. It's a great series.
That's really good. Yeah, that's really good as well. I've seen that.
They did a great one where they go into some African country and they end up buying a nuclear warhead. Well, they don't actually buy it,
right?
But they get to it sitting in the seat in the van next to them. Because the point of the documentary is to show just how easy it is for extremist groups or terrorists to acquire dirty bombs.
Wow!
And they themselves were able to acquire one.
Like we actually get Vice in Ireland.
Yeah, I get. It's a TV channel.
So it's a TV channel, and it's handy. Like, and also at nighttime they show boatloads of anime, so it's like cool. I can watch Tokyo Ghoul. This is awesome. Yeah, man. But look. If you're a wrestling fan, watch this. If you're not a wrestling fan, why are you listening to this podcast?
Yeah, why are you even listening to us?
Yeah, exactly.
Much like the documentary, the show's not made for you.
It's not made for you. But I would say, anyone could sit down and watch this because it does kind of have, like, some more than others. But, like, the Match Made in Heaven, the Last of the Von Erichs, Fabulous Moolah, the Benoit ones, they're just ones that you can just watch. Yeah. And just watch as anything,
There's ones that are going to hit you. There's ones that you're not going to expect to hit you, like the Jimmy Snuka one.
Whew. Yeah, man. That's
going to get you. I just need to mention it just
that
because
man is guilty as sin, and you're just like, wow. I was kind of heartbroken watching it because I'm just like, he's so guilty, but he got away with it, but he also didn't get away with it. Yeah. And there's people who are just there. You're like, the real world is crazier than wrestling. That's the truth of it. Oh, and this just proves it.
100%. I mean, Jimmy Snuka made Carol Baskin look innocent.
Oh yeah, that's. I hope that ages well because it's just so great.
Somebody listen. It's a time of quarantine, and one of the other cool things I would also say is maybe your wife or your girlfriend is somebody who's into those, murder shows where
Oh,
they
they love it.
and
They love it.
unsolved
Yeah,
mystery and stuff like that. This is a great thing to binge watch together during quarantine.
for
I
sure, for
totally
sure.
recommend it.
Yeah, like if you finish the Tiger King and you want to watch more
Yeah.
kind of murder stuff, yeah, watch this. It's great. It has kind of everything. It's not just a wrestling product,
No.
which is nice. It has that crossover appeal. But Dave, I want to talk about something else, but we have reached our limit. So everyone for
Yes.
listening on Phoenix 92.5 FM, thank you so much. We can continue, Dave, if you want to. If you don't, we can wrap up here.
Yeah, we can go into overtime. Right to those on the radio. Thanks for listening.
Okay, guys, we'll be back after this break. All right, and if you're listening to the stream, hey, we're still here. Broke the fourth wall, right? Fourth
No,
wall,
there
it's
we go.
gone. Yeah. So, everyone, thanks for listening to us here on the overdrive, the overrun. We haven't done an overrun yet, Dave. This is the
I mean,
first.
this has so much material in it. I was I mean, I know my thoughts are probably coming across, like I said, discombobulated at times because I was trying to connect things everywhere because this was so okay. There were really, I didn't want to attack Vice too much because I think we did enough job of getting how we felt about them.
Yeah,
And I certainly praised them for things, but there were things in this documentaries that were complete crap that
yeah,
I did not appreciate.
yeah. There was a lot of filler and a lot of garbage, but
Yeah, the
it,
shadowy
it
like stuff they did where they had like stand-ins for people. I was like,
I,
why?
I,
Put a picture on the screen.
I kind of enjoyed some of it. 'Cause some of it was actually fair. Some of them looked pretty good.
Yeah, the Chris Benoit guy looked
Was
like
spot
Chris
on.
Benoit.
But
Yeah.
but the Hulk Hogan guy was awful. It
Oh
was
my
just
god, it's
awful. It was
terrible.
terrible. Every time we flashed to him, I'm like, I can't take this seriously at all.
No
At
way.
all. The guys who did the brawl for all were quite good. No, the bit that was kind of funny, and I started laughing. The brawl for all when it's Bart Gunn and Harker Holly after he knocked them out, and they're saying, "Oh, we're in the hotel room," and it was kind of silent, and then it cuts to them just standing there. It was so funny. I was just like, "This really shouldn't be funny, but it really is." I just was like, "Oh, poor editing, poor editing."
Oh, yeah, I mean it was what it was. And I which I kind of want to talk about the ratings for this, 'cause I think it's important. And
Yes,
I don't think this is a series that's going to go away.
no,
Wrestling has a very, very dark history. They didn't even get into the steroid scandals yet, guys. They didn't even get into the steroid scandals of the 90s. Wait for them to do that season
I
3 or
I think
something.
season three is that's what they're gonna get into because there's so much wrestling to get through, like controversies, particularly before, like as I said, the Chris Benoit stuff changed wrestling, nearly ended wrestling completely, but it changed fundamentally all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
This kind of stuff didn't happen really as much after Chris Benoit because it couldn't. Like it's completely unsustainable. Like everybody was like, "Look, you got away with this." Like Chris Benoit is wrestling's 9/11.
It did.
Literally.
Yeah. Yeah.
As far as like it changed something so fundamentally that you can never go back to it. You know,
Yeah,
uh,
and there was one thing they took out of context, or at least I think they took out of context. When Chris Jericho was saying, like, you can't do steroids, you can't take a pills, like you had to get a prescription for aspirin.
yeah,
Jericho was talking about the post Benoit wellness policy, but Vice presented it as if that was the pre Benoit policy, and then
yeah,
immediately contradicted everything Jericho was saying,
yeah,
and that played weird to me, especially when Chris Jericho was narrating it. So
yeah.
I don't know why they made that choice. I didn't appreciate it
I
because
think it was an oversight.
okay.
I think it was an oversight. I noticed that too, and I'm like, yeah, no, this wasn't the way it was at all. Although, look, either it was an oversight or else WWE were like, "Ooh, you're gonna have to put that in to use our footage."
Okay.
There could be something there.
There's got to be something, and maybe
Like it's
I'm
weird.
trying to think
It's
about
weird.
these. See, I'm trying to think about how they were able to get away with using some of this footage, and we have to remember that SmackDown at that time, well, like it is now, was on broadcast television,
Yeah, it
not
wasn't cable.
cable television. Maybe enough time has passed for certain things. They don't become public domain, but maybe you're allowed to use. Like, isn't there? It's like kind of the rules on
Fair use.
the YouTube rules where
Yeah,
you can the fair use
yeah.
exactly. Like
Maybe,
I
maybe
have a
like that.
background behind me, but I shouted out, "Hey, this image is from Vice." It also has Vice's logo on. I'm not taking credit for creating this art. Like
Yeah, look, if,
that's
if if you're using something transformatively, and that's probably how they get away with it. But I don't know. Again, WWE could have just been saying, "Hey, look, take this, this, and this out," and then it's okay. We don't know,
Yeah.
and we'll never know because this is how
No.
this stuff works.
But
What
I
I
do want to mention. Sorry.
sorry,
I
sorry.
do want to mention the viewing and why I think there will be a season 3.
Oh yeah, the ratings are
The first.
the ratings are before you get into it. The
Yeah.
ratings for this are nearly better than Raw.
Oh my God, Raw can't be that bad, is it?
It's getting there. Well, they're definitely better than TNA anyway. They're in
That's
that
what
front.
I thought TNA would be really jealous of these ratings.
Yeah.
The first episode had 150,000 viewers, and then that grew throughout the season up to 200,000. The latest episode that aired, which was the Dino Bravo one last week, had 220. 100. Yeah, that's smart, David. I'm a history major. Sue me. Had 220,000 viewers. The highest rated episodes. No shocker. An extra 100,000 people watched the Chris Benoit episodes. But yeah, it seems to have great traction. They have no problem getting really great people to talk. See, that's what made this different than other documentaries. Is this wasn't produced by WWE, so I wasn't getting force-fed Vince's idea, but at the same time, yes, there was nonsense in it, and we can talk about that. But I just loved getting the firsthand perspective, like getting the firsthand perspective of Miss Elizabeth from Linda McMahon, from Linda Hogue, from
Yeah.
Polier, from that person was really insightful. For as much as I don't like her.
Yeah, like I really liked the voiceover. I thought Dirty Dutch Mantel was a great was was a great call for the older stuff because he was probably
Yeah.
involved in a lot of it. And Dutch is awesome anyway, so it
You
just worked.
can't understate his importance to the wrestling industry. I mean, a lot of
No,
people will
so
just remember
important.
him as that racist guy who came out
Zeb
in a
Coulter.
little scooter and with
Yeah,
Jack Swagger, but
no,
I mean, he's brilliant.
he really is like on the Mount Rushmore of like mid tier on a mid tier Mount Rushmore of wrestling. He's like he's
Mid-tier
there.
Mount Rushmore
Mid tier Mount Rushmore.
of
Exactly.
wrestling minds.
Exactly. He's there.
He's there.
Him, Vince Russo, Jim Cornette.
How dare you?
No, it's there.
How dare you not
He's
put
there.
him on the top tier?
The reason why he's not the reason why he's not on the top tier is because the Vandals would have their way with it. So
they would. But I'm just imagining because if you know what the America one looks like,
yeah.
I think the first and the fourth ones kind of are facing each other because of the way the mountain's built. So
Yeah.
You'd have to put Cornette and Russo looking at each other.
No, if I was Bill, I'd put them right beside each other just to piss off Jim Cornette. In perpetuity.
I don't know which would be worse. So that they have to stare at each other for eternity, or so that they have to touch for eternity. I don't know what's worse.
Oh my god! But it's one of the, like I want to talk a bit more on the Brawl for All because that's one that like I really enjoyed. As far as like all the way through because it took me right back to the Attitude Era. It took me right back to being a kid when, even though watching wrestling since the early 90s. But you only really kind of fall into it when you're like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, when it becomes more than just something that's on in the background and you're kind of cognizant of it. So it took me right back to the Attitude Era, or just before the Attitude Era, when I'm like, oh, cool, I know all these guys, and but to really kind of have a focused look on it, where it's like, oh, this kind of ran the same way as it does now, but it's completely different, was a very, very interesting way of looking at it. Because obviously, you wouldn't have this kind of look. It's, for example, the best way I can put it, when you watch movies based in the 20s or the 30s about old Hollywood and stuff that went on there, with the fixers and that. Great movie called Hail Caesar, which is all about it. And it's, when you're watching it, you're like, oh, similar stuff kind of happens now, but you seem to have this kind of rose-tinted view of things where you're like, oh, that didn't happen in the past. No way similar things happen. And then you're like, wait, no, people are still people. Technology just changes. And that was my big takeaway from that. It was one of the times where I could remember seeing it happening. Now watching it as an adult with perspective, I have a different take on it completely. And it also gave me that sense of, well, these were just humans doing stuff, and running wrestling. And wrestling's always run the same way. And the fact that So that was the context that we got, and then the story behind it, where it was just Vince Russo just being, going out for JBL. Man,
I didn't know that.
I can't believe
That
that.
was no.
But I enjoyed the way it was shot. I enjoyed the interviews. It was cool the interplay with Jim Cornette and Vince Russo, and the perspective from even like Godfather. I didn't realize Godfather was such a badass. Also, it makes a lot more sense. A lot of the stuff that they did, how much drugs they were doing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's something I touched on briefly, but can we? Oh my God, the amount of cocaine that these people were doing.
So much drugs, like
So much
so
drugs, like
much
New
drugs,
Jack, everybody just
so
drugs.
much
They
drugs.
were literally like, I was getting high.
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah,
oh
I almost
yeah.
killed this guy, but I was getting high.
I was just like, I was so high the whole time. I was just like, oh my god, wow, like it's a different world. It's a
Yeah.
different world. Like, there's no way that could happen now. Like, it's not
No.
possible for it to go out and be coked out of your head and then go in and wrestle a match. It's just, well, I suppose it could happen in an indie fed somewhere, but it's not going to happen
Right.
in WWE. It's not going to happen on a main television show,
No.
Or one
But
would hope.
this is a time when Mike Tyson was doing coke before his boxing matches. I mean,
Yeah.
this wasn't just wrestling.
No.
There's certainly something going around. I want to something about Brawl for All. Well, that also stuck out is because I read a little bit about it afterwards because it's such a vague memory. Like I
Mm.
said, I initially thought this was like a name of a pay-per-view and that it all took place one night. I'm reading about the fact that because we know Dan Severn, first of all, probably could have won the whole tournament outright had
He
he just
was
stayed in it.
he was supposed to.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
he would have, quite
Yeah.
frankly. And he pulled out, his reasoning being, I don't have anything to prove. This is a joke to me because we're talking about a legitimate UFC fighter.
Ken Shamrock was supposed to asked to be in it as well.
Well, see, I've heard different things.
Mm.
I've heard. See, okay. According to a radio interview, and I'm taking this from Wikipedia, so who knows? But according to a radio interview, Severn had said that at first the WWF was not even going to allow him or Ken Shamrock to compete at all, and that they removed Severn from the tournament after his first round victory. However, Dr. Death says that they decided that to withdraw because they didn't like the rules and having to wear boxing gloves. So there's a controversy in and of itself that they could have talked about in the documentary, which is, did these guys pull out, or did the WWF not want their wrestlers exposed? I mean, that there's a whole thing. Like, there's so many theories that just multiply over top of these. And I didn't even think there was one about Brawl for All that you could get into with these things.
Well, the one thing that did always strike me watching it was the names on it were, what's the nice way to put it? Not top tier guys. They were guys who were either never going anywhere or not going anywhere fast. And what I mean by that is, I'm like, there were some names, some very famous names here. Your Steve Blackman's, obviously Bradshaw, who will become a world champion. Hardcore Holly and The Godfather. Like, they're names that most wrestling fan or most people who watch wrestling would know, even tangentially. But they didn't have The Undertaker in there. They didn't have Kane in there. They didn't have guys who were big draws. Like Stone Cold Steve Austin wasn't there. There were people who were there who could afford to be beaten and it not hurt them. One would think,
right?
And that was probably done deliberately. There was like a lot of debate whether or not this was fixed or not. Yeah, it was. I would believe that these rounds are fixed. They had to be.
Well, here's the interesting thing is that according to Bob Holly, Dr. Death was paid the $100,000 prize.
They said that on the documentary.
The second round.
Yeah, they said that on the documentary. Yeah.
So I don't know if they were just overconfident or whatever, but it's also something that they could have talked about. And I know this was kind of like crap on Vince Russo. This is the one, even though I think he kind of came out looking all right at the end of it with the whole Jim Cornette being super crazy thing. Is that people forget that, yes, okay, this was a terrible idea, obviously, and all of that stuff. Maybe I still enjoyed it. I'm in that camp, but yes, at first it did not go well. Fans were booing it. They were chanting, we want wrestling and all of this. But that's because fans assumed, oh, this is fake. They're not really punching each other, blah, blah,
Mm.
blah. But as the people started to realize, oh, this might be real. We might actually be seeing them wrestle. It is worth noting, for whatever you want to take this for, the crowd reactions got better and the ratings for the segments did go up as the tournament progressed.
See, it was. I think from the way it was presented, there was no kind of like clear distinction, demarcation between, hey, this is not wrestling, this is a real fight. But
Right.
wrestling hadn't like. Well, this was 1998 into 1999.
This was your scramble era. If
This
you
was
were
just
WWE, they were trying to stay in business.
yeah. So this
And
was for
every 15 minutes mattered to
so
them.
sorry, Yana. It was 1999. It was June 1998
1998. Yeah.
to August 1998. Yeah, so it was way earlier than I thought it was. But kayfabe had already been broken. We had the Montreal screw job, so it would have been okay to come out and be like, "Hey, see all that? That's not real. This is real." And have some kind of pride thing. But they didn't set it up that way. Initially, it wasn't supposed to be. It was supposed to be like an MMA kind of thing, but they didn't know what they were doing, and that's when all the injuries happened because MMA
Right.
really messes you up. Um,
Yeah, there's a reason that
you only fight once a year, and you train for months beforehand. Um, so yeah, and then there's we'll just make it a boxing thing, which is less bad, but still very bad. You're not supposed to box nearly as much as they did here because these were all in like what, a month and a half, 2 months max.
right, yeah, because that was even one of the things Bart Gunn said. He was like, "Okay, I'll box against Butterbean, but can I have some time to train?" Like,
But it's funny when they said it because I remember watching that and Bart Gunn coming out. I remember watching it at WrestleMania. Like, I have a lot of fond memories at WrestleMania, and that's not a good WrestleMania, but I watched it a lot. No, I did actually watch it when it happened. Um, I
which
remember
WrestleMania was that? That was
it. It
15.
it was WrestleMania 15. Yeah,
Yeah, 15.
it was the one in Philadelphia.
Oh
So,
yes.
but I remember seeing Bart Gunn. I'm like, who's this? Isn't Bart Gunn? Because it looked completely different to him. He looked like a different guy. Um, and it was for all intents and purposes because he had learned to box. He was presenting himself as a legit boxer. And Butterbean was like, if he had just fought like he did in the Brawl for All, he would have won. It's
Yeah.
like, there you go. Like,
And that's one of the magical things about MMA, is that you take a guy like, well, I guess you could literally use Butterbean as an example. You can take a guy like Butterbean, you can put him in with a small guy, and you have MMA rules and not boxing rules. And hey, I mean, jiu-jitsu is going to win every single time. So yeah, you're right. If he had gone with that style, or so, I don't know.
yeah, like,
But it was supposed to be a bar fight. But at the same time, you had the APA having bar fights. So
see, again, if they had just presented it, it all comes down to booking and presentation.
yeah,
I know you can't book a real fight, but they did try and they failed. But there was no follow through because they didn't really know what they had. Like, I think that if the Brawl for All had just ended as it was, with Bart Gunn winning, and then his gimmick come back. But he did get the rub by fighting Butterbean, but then he lost because he fought Butterbean in a real
right.
fight,
And they did nothing with
and they
him.
did nothing with him. So it was like it was a whole. The sad part is it ended a bunch of careers.
Right.
It damaged all the guys involved, and nothing was achieved except for Bradshaw, who even still, even though he got beaten, he still was a doucher.
Yeah, it didn't make him a better person at
It didn't make
all.
him a better person. No, it
If
was.
anything, he probably held a grudge for years that he took out on people eventually. I mean, oh
But what I say is, it's one of the less horrible ones. It's one where you kind of enjoy it, and if for as distant as it is, comparatively, it's relatively recent.
definitely relatively recent.
It.
But can
Yeah, go on.
I just never mind. What I was gonna say. Continue.
Oh, never mind. Yeah, there's a few in this.
You
Like
got that.
the Benoit ones are the most recent ones, I think, and then you have the Brawl for All, the Montreal Screwjob, and they're the most recent. So it is a series that jumps around a lot. We've jumped around a lot in this review, but you know, pick a point and watch. But as Dave said, probably the best way to watch it is episode by episode because it's
Yeah,
spaced out nicely.
and they kind of emotionally, especially if you binge watch it, like I said, they'll take you on a roller coaster ride so that it's not just like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I can't watch this. I can't watch this.
Hmm.
Because you go Chris Benoit, but then you get New Jack, which is okay, horrible but hilarious.
Yeah.
Not for the people he wrestled, obviously.
But outside of it, at a
Outside
distance,
of it, yeah,
it's
at a
hilarious.
distance.
Yeah.
And then from there, you go into New Jack, which is definitely much more lighthearted, but again, still has dark things in it. And then you go heavy. Then
Yeah.
you go into two murders back to back.
Hmm.
So you go into the Jimmy Snuka, which
Yeah.
here's what, and this is what I'm saying, that they hinted at some theories that we toss around as wrestling, what jerks. I don't know what the hell do we call ourselves, Derek? Just wrestling people. I'm
Wrestling
not
media.
gonna.
Wrestling media. Let's use
I
that
don't.
term.
I'm not even gonna use that term. I'm not even gonna.
Wrestling fans that have a podcast.
Wrestling fans that have a podcast. Okay, so there's lots of crazy theories that we like to throw around because of that.
Yeah.
And one of them that Vice touched on with Jimmy Snuka is there was a closed door meeting where Vince McMahon shows up with a briefcase.
Which I've heard.
And what?
I've heard that for years. Did you not know that?
I've heard about that, but it was like,
I thought
okay, and
that was common knowledge. That was
yeah,
just known. Apparently, Vince walked around with briefcases full of money.
but they never said it was full. See, they didn't say it was full money in the document.
Fair,
Like, that's what
they didn't.
it was like.
Fair.
They held back on things.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
they like with Bruiser Brody, they made it super obvious that it was Jose. It was it's Invader number one that killed him, and
Yeah.
I was like, but was it though?
Yeah.
Because they did hint at it, and that's what kept going to me.
See,
Hinted at it by saying them, like, oh, he said they got me. And I was like, okay, go with that. Who's
but
it?
my dad,
but no.
my dad has a rule with TV documentaries. He's like,
Okay,
he has a saying. He's always like, yeah, they take it on a great story, but you're always kind of left not knowing anything more than you did really when you came into it. Like, you'd watch a history documentary, for example, on History Channel, and it's like, something like Great Mysteries of the Egyptians,
right.
and they'll bring it on a great little story, and then at the end it's like, well, make up your own mind, and you're like,
Yeah,
come on, like, which is it? Like, so that's kind of what happened here in some of these. They're like, make up your own mind. It could be this. So
I felt like they didn't do that so much with Bruiser Brody. Though they were pretty. They put their foot down that this is who it was.
Yeah.
And and now this guy's doing kids' birthday parties, and I'm like, I don't know. I didn't realize. See, I didn't realize Carlos Colon was so connected to it. I didn't realize Dutch was connected to. See, it's one of those things where I didn't know the people surrounding it. I just was aware of this wrestler that was at the time mysteriously killed in Puerto Rico. Was always, whenever I'd stumble across it on like news sites, that's always how it was presented.
Yeah.
So
no, I think that's one thing overall this series showed. This series showed how interconnected wrestling actually is.
And how mob connected wrestling is.
Well, that also wasn't surprising. That wasn't surprising either.
Well, everything in that era was mob.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fair.
You weren't running anything if it didn't go through the mob.
No, because you got to pay for the building. Who do you think you're paying for the building and the workers?
But that's one thing that even I remember Adam Martin did an interview with Dutch, and he was telling he had some crazy stories all about working in South America and stuff like that. So I just assume like it just made sense, and to give that kind of context, it's crazy to think that our little fun fake show that we watch every week has its origins in drugs, violence, coke, and carnivals, and criminal, and you're like,
the criminal enterprise.
The criminal is huge, man. It's like obviously you think boxing, you're like, yeah, boxing makes, but wrestling, it's already fake. It doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be
more fake.
Yeah,
but that was the weird, and I wonder if I don't know how you cover it. Well, actually, maybe the next episode, the David Schultz episode, might actually cover the whole real versus fake thing and the breaking of that wall, because that's really what did it much more than the screw job.
Yeah,
they painted Hart in some hellish light with that, so I don't know how I felt, but we are getting a cocaine episode right after that, so
Yeah, like I tell you what,
As if there hasn't been enough on this show. I
well,
mean,
I think we'll continue to talk about it every week. Maybe we could kind of discuss that week's in a segment, because it's such a good show. It really is, and it's kind of it's neat to have it during a time when there's not a lot of news happening in wrestling. So I think as the weeks go on, we'll kind of cover it to its completion, and then maybe do another
yeah.
overview. So we'll break this into like a weekly kind of thing. Guys, if you're listening, do you want to get involved, you can email us nerdtoknowmedia@gmail.com. That's nerdtoknowmedia@gmail.com. It's also on Twitter. I finally got around to fixing their Twitter, Dave. Um,
Oh,
so,
nice.
so,
Fantastic. I was
so,
going to ask you about that. So, yeah.
yeah, so we're back on Twitter. I just kind of forgot Twitter was a thing because I'm so enamored by Instagram. Um,
I get you. It's
yeah,
politics ruined Twitter.
yeah. See, that's it. I was just
A
like,
shocker to everybody listening, but it doesn't
yeah,
matter which side of the aisle you're on. It's like
exactly.
I can't
It's
stand the outrage culture. Like it used to be awesome for promoting things and
yeah,
letting
and
people know this is coming on now. Like, hey, you want to watch our show? We're going live now, and it's like, but this is just going to get buried under posts of. I will say it is worth noting that the leader of the free world tweeted a picture of Triple H on his motorcycle this
yeah.
week,
Actually,
and I'm going to leave it at that because I don't
there,
want to get political. But
the,
that was that I smiled really big when I saw that picture.
I will say there's a great rundown from the Observer lads, a rant on wrestling and wrestling and politics. Watch
Mhm.
it. On Nerd No Media, we did a panel this time, well, summer last year, called "Literally Everything Is Wrestling," and
Yes.
when we did it, we said we're not going to talk about politics because it's too easy. Because politics is literally just wrestling for normies. That's all
Wrestling
it
for
is.
no it is.
That's all it is. It's just like
You're 100% right, and I'm sure this was a line you might have used, but it's a classic line. I don't know where I heard it first, but it gets tossed around in the wrestling community that you know you have heels and you have baby faces, and they're enemies, and they go against each other. But at the end of the day, they're going out and they're drinking together and eating meals together. And you have Republicans and Democrats, and they have these ideas, and they're on opposite sides. But at the end of the day, they're going to the same
that was either
golf clubs
it was
together.
that was either Jesse Ventura or the guy who does Joe Rogan. It was one of them. I think it was Jesse Ventura who said that.
Well,
But
that was during my heyday of listening to Rogan's podcast, and Ventura was on the episode, so
yeah,
maybe that's
so
even maybe
that's
what
probably
it's.
what it was.
Yeah,
I remember seeing it in one of Alex Jones's documentaries.
no,
So that's where I seen it.
oh,
Um,
you could still get those. You could still find
no,
those.
this is before they were scrubbed off the internet, my friend. You have to have a backup. Um,
Oh my
but
gosh.
yeah, because Joe Rogan was all over those for a while, and so was Ventura. So I'm like, cool, I'll watch these. Yeah. So if
Yeah.
you're on Twitter, you can find us either at Nerds Now Media on Twitter or for this show at WVI Desk. Um, and the same with Facebook and all that kind of stuff. You can just look for it because we're there. Yeah, and we'll interact because it as annoying as Twitter is for the reasons you mentioned, it is very direct and it's very straightforward. And I remember why I like Twitter. It's been a
Yeah.
very long time since I've actually liked Twitter because of all the reasons you mentioned. But from going through it today, I'm like, cool. I set it up and I didn't realize you could have multiple accounts um on the app and on the web interface, so I can actually check it now.
Right.
I went on the Nerd to Know Media one, and there was loads of stuff. I'm like, oh dear,
Oh
oh
dear.
dear.
Oh dear.
So I will,
I love that that's your reaction.
yeah.
I'd be like, so much work. It's just like, oh dear.
I gotta like respond to all these people and set this up. So yeah,
Fantastic.
we'll be monitoring those. So if you want to reach out, please do and email us at Nerd to Know Media.
Yes, please do. If there's a topic you want us to discuss, if you want our take on something that hasn't even been covered in one of these documentaries, we'll do that because
Oh
that's
yeah.
kind of dirty stuff that we like to get into. This was, I think, it was my favorite topic we've had so far. Easily, it's just.
I loved it. I like one thing we're doing on Nerd to Know Media is we're covering The Simpsons season by season.
Oh.
So it's kind of a similar thing, but less harrowing, obviously. But this was great. I really enjoyed, just being able to sit down, watch these documentaries, have some notes, and be able to dig into it. So yeah, by all means, it was like what we did with the religious angles in wrestling. To have that kind of that interplay and to be able to go and have that focus streamline was very cool
Right.
indeed. So good job, Dave, for coming up with that, man. It was
Well,
really fun.
there's, everybody's always going to be talking about the news, and when something major happens, like last week or 2 weeks ago with all the release, yeah, we'll talk about it. But we want to be a show that's more of something that you were talking about might hold up over time, or is something that there's a topic that you're interested to, so you listen to it. It's not just another wrestling podcast. This is the first wrestling podcast ever hosted by wrestling fans, and I think that's.
Yeah, we don't.
Can that be our tagline?
Yeah, we don't hate wrestling.
We don't hate wrestling, believe it or not. Yeah. So tune in.
You know what? That's a pretty good tagline. Yeah, guys, and if you don't hate wrestling as well, thanks for joining us. Because the problem with wrestling media is that you start hating what you're watching, and that's when you become a ranty, angry mess. It's much more fun to just enjoy it for what it is. Even when it is something as dark as, the dark side of the ring. What made it so impactful is it captured the love of wrestling, or the graw, as we'd say in Irish, of wrestling. That's like, this is what we love, and and then when something happens that shakes it completely, you're like, well, this is why it shakes it completely, because it took away that innocence and made it something totally different. But look, any topic that you guys want to mention, if we can see it, we'll cover it. That's my rule. Don't pick something that I have to go out of my way to find.
Don't tell me to watch the bonus disc number 4 from Royal Rumble '92. Okay,
yeah,
I don't have it. I only have bonus disc 3. Yeah. I lost the 4th one.
Actually, one thing that did happen last week, I mentioned the hardcore documentary, the hardcore disc. Yeah, it actually arrived. I couldn't believe it. It arrived super quick. Nice. So I'm going to probably watch that this week.
If you want to watch, well, we can talk off air.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, that arrived, and I couldn't believe it. So fair play, Amazon, for picking that order up. But
that's definitely an essential.
Well,
I'm glad it got delivered.
Yeah, I can't believe it. But yeah, guys, we're here. We're only a tweet away, and if you want to check out everything of all your shows that's on Nerd to Know Media, go over to nerdtoknowmedia.com and check it out. So we will talk to you next week. So
yeah, and hey, don't forget to subscribe on Twitch, YouTube, everything. Ring the bell. Can we be those people?
Let's do it. Ring the bell. Ring the bell. Ring the bell. Smash that like, subscribe and follow, all that junk that normal people do. I hate that phrase so much.
We want to get in the algorithm, guys. Help us out.
Exactly. But yeah, so if you want to do that, that'll help us out. Like the video and all that kind of stuff. But yeah,
the only wrestling podcast hosted by wrestling fans.
See you next week, guys.